You're about to witness one of the most uncomfortable television moments ever recorded, where a simple interview turns into an all-out verbal war that ends with a guest storming off set. This is the story of Billy Bob Thornton's explosive clash with Joy Behar on The View. And trust me, you won't believe how quickly this thing goes off the rails. Before we dive into this wild ride, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think about talk show hosts who push their guests too far. Now, let's get into this absolute train wreck. The tension was palpable from the moment Billy Bob Thornton walked onto the View set. He'd been making his rounds promoting his latest project, and everything had been going smoothly until he landed in that familiar chair across from the panel. Joy Behar, sitting with her usual smug confidence, had clearly done her homework, but not in the way you'd expect from a professional interviewer. So Billy Bob, Joy began, leaning forward with that trademark smile that never quite reached her eyes. I have to ask about your love life because, let's be honest, that's what people really want to know about. Billy Bob shifted slightly in his chair, his expression already showing signs of discomfort. Well, Joy, I'd rather talk about the work, you know. That's why I'm here. Oh, come on, Joy laughed, waving her hand dismissively. You can't expect to come on here and not talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, 6 marriages. That's got to be some kind of Hollywood record. The other co-hosts exchanged glances, sensing the immediate shift in energy. Whoopi tried to interject with a gentle redirect, but Joy was already locked and loaded. I think my personal life is well personal, Billy Bob replied, his southern drawl carrying a warning edge. I'm here to talk about my music, my film work. But Billy Bob, Joy pressed on, completely ignoring his obvious discomfort. Don't you think the public has a right to know? I mean, when you're a public figure making millions of dollars, don't you owe us some honesty about why you can't seem to make a marriage work in Marriage of Not? Marriage of Not. The silence that followed was deafening. You could literally see Billy Bob's jaw tighten as he processed what had just been said to him on national television. Excuse me, he said quietly, his voice dropping to that dangerous register that anyone who knew him would recognize as a red flag. I'm just saying, Joy continued, apparently oblivious to the storm she was brewing. It's a pattern, isn't it? And patterns usually mean there's something deeper going on, maybe some issues you need to work through. Issues I need to work through. Billy Bob repeated slowly, his eyes narrowing. Are you qualified to give me psychological advice, Joy? Because last I checked. You're a comedian, not a therapist. The audience was dead silent now. Even the cameras seemed to be holding their breath. Well, I'm just observing what everyone else can see. Joy shot back, her tone becoming more aggressive. 6 marriages, Billy Bob, 6. At some point, don't you have to look in the mirror and ask yourself what the common denominator is? The common denominator, Billy Bob said, his voice now ice cold, is that I believed in love enough to keep trying. What's your common denominator, Joy? Besides making guests uncomfortable on television, Joy's face flushed red. I think I'm asking fair questions that any journalist would ask. Journalist? Billy Bob let out a bitter laugh. Is that what you call yourself? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like tabloid harassment with a television budget. The other co-hosts were frantically trying to regain control of the interview, but it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. There was no stopping what was coming next. I don't have to sit here and be insulted, Joy snapped, her professional facade completely cracking now. Funny, Billy Bob replied, leaning back in his chair with a sardonic smile. I was thinking the exact same thing. You know what your problem is? Joy said, pointing her finger at him. You think because you're some kind of Hollywood bad boy, you can come on here and treat people with disrespect. My problem. Billy Bob's voice was rising now, his famous temper finally breaking through. My problem is that I agreed to come on a show where the host thinks personal attacks are the same thing as interviewing. I wasn't attacking you. Joy protested, but her voice had lost its conviction. Really? Because telling someone on national television that they have issues and can't make relationships work sounds pretty much like an attack to me. But hey, what do I know? I'm just the guy with the issues, right? The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Production assistants were whispering frantically into their headsets, and you could see the other panelists desperately trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of the interview. Look, Joy said, trying to backtrack now that she realized how bad this was looking. I think we may have gone off on the wrong foot here. Wrong foot. Billy Bob stood up from his chair, his movements deliberate and controlled. Joy, we didn't get off on the wrong foot. You decided to ambush me with personal attacks disguised as questions, and now you want to act like it was some kind of misunderstanding. I was just trying to have an honest conversation, Joy insisted, but her voice was getting smaller. Honest conversation. Billy Bob shook his head, a look of disgust crossing his face. There's nothing honest about what you just did. You came at me with predetermined judgments about my life, my relationships, my character. And you call that journalism. The camera was capturing every moment of this meltdown. And you could see in Joy's eyes that she was beginning to realize just how badly she'd miscalculated this entire situation. You want to talk about miscalculation? Billy Bob continued, his voice gaining momentum. Let me tell you about miscalculation. Miscalculation is thinking you can invite someone onto your show and then spend the entire time trying to tear them down instead of having a real conversation. Joy was visibly flustered now, her usual quick wit seemingly abandoned. Billy Bob, I think you're overreacting. This is how interviews work. We ask questions, you answer them. Questions. He let out a harsh laugh. Those weren't questions, Joy. Those were accusations wrapped up in question marks. There's a difference. And if you can't see that, then you have no business calling yourself a professional interviewer. Whoopi finally managed to break in, her voice calm but firm. Okay, let's all take a breath here. And no. Billy Bob cut her off, but his tone toward Whoopi was respectful. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Whoopi, but this needs to be said. Your colleague here just spent the last 5 minutes attacking my personal life, questioning my character and suggesting I have psychological problems, all while hiding behind the pretense of journalism. Joy's face was getting redder by the second. I never said you had psychological problems. Really? Billy Bob turned to face her directly. Because when you ask someone why they can't make marriages work and suggest they need to look in the mirror at the common denominator, that's pretty much armchair psychology, isn't it? I was making an observation, Joy said defensively. An observation, Billy Bob repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Is that what we're calling character assassination these days? An observation? Well, here's an observation for you, Joy. You've been sitting there with that smug look on your face, acting like you've got me all figured out. But you don't know the first thing about me or my life. I know what's public record. Joy shot back, her defensiveness turning back to aggression. Public record. Billy Bob's voice was incredulous. Now, you think you know someone's life story because you read some tabloid headlines. That's your idea of research. That's your preparation for interviewing someone. The other co-hosts were looking increasingly uncomfortable. You could see them trying to figure out if they should intervene or just let this play out. But Billy Bob was just getting started. Let me tell you what you don't know from your public record. He continued. You don't know about the times I've helped people in this industry when they were struggling. You don't know about the charities I support quietly without press releases. You don't know about the relationships that ended amicably or the friendships that have lasted decades. But none of that fits your narrative, does it? I wasn't trying to create a narrative, Joy protested weakly. Of course you were, Billy Bob fired back. The narrative of the Hollywood bad boy who can't commit, who has issues, who's damaged goods. That's the story you wanted to tell today, isn't it? Joy was scrambling now, clearly realizing this had gone way beyond anything she'd anticipated. Billy Bob, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Misunderstanding. He shook his head slowly. No, Joy. There's no misunderstanding. You understood exactly what you were doing when you decided to turn this interview into an attack session. What you didn't understand was that I wasn't going to sit here and take it quietly. The audience was completely silent, riveted by this real-time destruction of what should have been a routine promotional interview. You know what the really sad part is? Billy Bob continued, his voice now carrying a note of genuine disappointment. I came here today actually excited to talk to you all. I've watched this show. I respect what it usually represents. I thought this was going to be a fun conversation about music, about acting, about the creative process. It still can be, Joyce said hopefully. But even she didn't sound convinced. No, it can't, Billy, Bob replied firmly. Because you've shown me and everyone watching exactly who you really are. You're not interested in having a conversation. You're interested in creating drama, in getting a reaction, in making yourself look clever at your guest's expense. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For once in her career, she seemed completely at a loss for words. And the worst part, Billy Bob went on relentlessly, is that you're sitting there acting like I'm the one being unreasonable, like I'm the one with the problem. You ambush me with personal attacks and then act shocked when I defend myself. I wasn't attacking you, Joy managed to say, but her voice was barely above a whisper. Really? Billy Bob's eyebrows raised. Because if someone came up to you on the street and started questioning your ability to maintain relationships, suggesting you had issues that needed working through, and implying that your personal failures were somehow the public's business, what would you call that? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it. That's what I thought, Billy Bob said quietly. You know it was an attack, Joy. Everyone in this room knows it was an attack. The only question now is whether you're going to own up to it or keep pretending you were just doing your job. The camera zoomed in on Joy's face, capturing every moment of her growing discomfort. You could literally see her trying to figure out how to get out of the hole she dug for herself. I think she said slowly that maybe we should move on to talking about your current project. Billy Bob stared at her for a long moment, and you could see him weighing his options. The silence stretched on until it became almost unbearable. Move on, he finally said, his voice quiet, but carrying an edge that made everyone in the room tense up. Just like that, you think you can spend 10 minutes trying to humiliate me on television and then just move on like nothing happened? Joy shifted uncomfortably in her chair, clearly hoping the moment would pass. But Billy Bob wasn't finished. You know what, Joy? I think the audience deserves to understand what just happened here. They tuned in expecting to see a normal interview, and instead they got to watch you try to psychoanalyze me on live television. Billy Bob, please, Joy said, her voice now pleading rather than confrontational. Can we just start over? Start over. Billy Bob's laugh was bitter. You think this is some kind of game where you get a do-over when things don't go your way. This isn't a rehearsal, Joy. This is live television, and you just showed millions of people exactly how you treat guests when you think you can get away with it. The other hosts were exchanging frantic looks, clearly wanting to intervene, but not knowing how to diffuse a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. I apologize if I offended you, Joy said, but even her apology sounded half-hearted. If you offended me, Billy Bob's voice rose again. There's no if about it, Joy. You absolutely offended me. You offended me as a guest, as a professional, and as a human being. And that weak excuse for an apology just makes it worse. Joy's face was now a deep shade of red, whether from embarrassment or anger. It was hard to tell. I don't know what else you want me to say. I want you to say something real, Billy. Bob replied, his voice intense. I want you to admit that you came into this interview with an agenda. I want you to acknowledge that you were more interested in creating a spectacle than having a genuine conversation. I want you to own what you did instead of hiding behind excuses. I was doing my job, Joy said, but her voice lacked conviction. Your job? Billy Bob stood up fully now, his presence commanding the entire studio. Is character assassination part of your job description? Is making guests uncomfortable your professional responsibility? Because if that's what you think your job is, then you're in the wrong business. The tension in the room was suffocating. Production crew members were frozen in place. Cameras kept rolling, and the audience sat in stunned silence watching this unprecedented meltdown unfold. You want to know what your real job should be? Billy Bob continued, packing slightly now. Your job should be to create a space where people can share their stories, their passions, their work. Your job should be to ask questions that illuminate, not questions that humiliate. Joy finally found her voice again, but it came out as defensiveness masquerading as authority. I've been doing this for decades, Billy Bob. I know how to conduct an interview. Decades. Billy Bob stopped packing and stared at her. You've been doing this wrong for decades. That doesn't make you experienced, Joy. That makes you a professional bully with a television show. The words hit like a slap. You could see Joy's face crumple slightly. The reality of how badly this had gone, finally sinking in. That's not fair, she whispered. Fair? Billy Bob's voice was incredulous. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you decided to turn my personal relationships into entertainment for your audience? Was it fair when you suggested I had psychological issues? Was it fair when you treated me like a circus animal performing tricks for your amusement? Whoopi tried one more time to salvage the situation. No, Whoopi. He cut her off gently but firmly. I appreciate you trying to help, but this needs to be said. What happened here today is bigger than just a bad interview. This is about how we treat people, about basic human dignity, about professional responsibility. He turned back to Joy, his gaze steady and unforgiving. You sit behind that desk with your platform, your audience, your power, and you think that gives you the right to tear people down for entertainment. Well, it doesn't. Joy was looking down at her cards now, unable to meet his eyes. Intent doesn't matter when the impact is this clear, Billy Bob replied. You may not have meant to, but that's exactly what you tried to do. And the fact that you can't see it even now is the most troubling part of all. The silence that followed was deafening. Billy Bob looked around the studio, taking in the shocked faces of the crew, the uncomfortable expressions of the other hosts, and Joy's obvious distress. You know what? He said finally, his voice now calm but resolute. I came here to promote my work, to have a conversation, to connect with people. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks personal attacks are the same thing as journalism. He started moving toward his chair to collect his things. I don't need this. And more importantly, your audience doesn't deserve this. They tune in expecting better, and you let them down just as much as you let me down. Joy looked up at him, her eyes now showing genuine regret. Billy Bob, please don't leave like this. He paused, considering her words carefully. How should I leave, Joy? Should I sit back down and pretend this didn't happen? Should I smile and play along while you continue to treat me like a target instead of a guest? I just thought, Joy started, but Billy Bob held up his hand. That's the problem right there, he said. You thought you could get away with it. You thought you could attack me and I just take it quietly. You thought wrong with that. He picked up his jacket and started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed his every move, capturing what would become one of the most talked about moments in daytime television history. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, turning back to address the audience directly. You deserve better than this. You deserve hosts who respect their guests and understand the difference between tough questions and personal attacks. Unfortunately, that's not what you got today. Joy made one last desperate attempt to save face. Billy Bob, this doesn't have to end like this. He stopped at the edge of the stage and looked back at her one final time. Yes, Joy, it does. Because some things can't be unsaid, some lines can't be uncrossed, and some behavior can't be excused. What you did today crossed every one of those lines. And with that, Billy Bob Thornton walked off the view set, leaving behind a stunned studio, a humiliated host, and a moment that would define how not to treat a guest on live television. The aftermath was immediate and brutal, with social media exploding in real time as viewers processed what they had just witnessed. This wasn't just a bad interview. It was a masterclass in how quickly things can go wrong when professional boundaries are crossed and basic respect is abandoned. So there you have it. The complete breakdown of one of the most uncomfortable moments in talk show history. What do you think? Was Billy Bob right to walk out, or should he have handled it differently? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe.